nasty guy from all other accounts. Any guy, buddy, that really wants to throw a bunch of people into a furnace is kind of hideous in my book anyway. I mean, so let's start off with Daniel chapter 3. We're going to read all of chapter 3. And from there, we'll dive into the fiery furnace.
So the
So here to see in the fiery furnace, what starts all of this out? And if we take a look at what did Nebuchadnezzar build and what commandment did he violate? Yeah, and do you know what command he violated? Yeah. Yeah. Exodus 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. Have nothing before me, and make no likenesses. So he made an idol. That's his first mistake. Second mistake is he's like, now everybody worship it. And as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego here, as we learned in the lesson, decided against it. So what command was it given? What was the key for them? When they heard the music. Now, as I read this passage, I don't know how right, wrong, or anything, but I was reminded of the time when I was in the Middle East, and I heard the calls across the sirens. Everybody falls down, and I'm like, sounds like a familiar passage to me. Whether they come out of this or not, I don't know, but that is exactly what it reminded me of. And they fell down and they worshiped toward Mecca. And here, excuse me, everybody in Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was to fall down and worship the idol that King Nebuchadnezzar had put up, to worship his likeness, King Nebuchadnezzar's likeness, and worship in his glory, not about God. So we can infer, going down here into question 5, what can we infer about Nebuchadnezzar's character? Knowing that he ordered people to worship something that looked like him. Narcissist, self-centered, yep, very much so. Oh, huge pride, huge pride. He is more than God. He is the person who made this. He is the person who can destroy this. He is the person who can take it away. I am the end all and the be all. What was the penalty for failing to worship this idol? Yep, cast into a fiery furnace. And I have to think to myself, is this a fiery furnace they had going all the time? Or is it just for punishment purposes, like in an arena? I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Exactly. So if they're starting it up, maybe it's some weird punishments these guys come up with, because there's a lot of weird punishments in history. A lot. So, yes, the fiery furnace. And that was the penalty for. So how did King Nebuchadnezzar even find out that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego weren't bowing down? Exactly. And as you know, I remember somewhere in the back of my brain, there's a rattling around some children's story in Sunday school, that these people who went and told Nebuchadnezzar were jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were looking for ways to get rid of these guys because they've been promoted.
And not only that, but if they didn't, and Nebuchadnezzar found out that they knew about it and didn't report it, then they would be in the furnace as well.
Right. And, they went on the vegan diet that we discussed earlier, and they still gained, prominence and gained, health and wisdom. So somewhere in the back of my mind, it keeps thinking that these Chaldeans probably had it out for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to begin with. And when they found out that, they're not worshiping as they were supposed to, they took the opportunity to go tell the king. And here's where we start getting into the meat of today's lesson. So how did the king respond? Exactly. Brought him to him. But did he cast them into the fire immediately? Was his first thing say, all right, into the fire, let's go? No, they didn't. King Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm going to give you guys a second chance. Hear the music, bow down, we're done, we're out of here, you can still serve in my court. So how did the three men respond? Mm-hmm. And let's go back and actually read that again. Filled with fury. It's the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. We're not going to respond to this. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hands, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. So their response is, our God is greater than you. We serve him and him alone. We're not going to bow down. Do what you want to us. We will not change our ways. We will not bow down. And if you deem that we need to be thrown in the furnace, then so be it. We will still serve our God. We will not bow down to yours or the image that you have set up. So here they've made their choice. I mean, they were given an opportunity first when they erected the image, and the fear that Nebuchadnezzar probably put in everybody to worship it. And they were given a second chance. They knew the consequences. I mean, King Nebuchadnezzar is not the type of person who's going to say, oh, maybe you didn't get the memo, or the mail was delivered late. That's not going to fly here. This guy's pretty hardcore. He does give a second chance because he has, I'm going to infer, seen what these men can do and how they have served in his court before. But when they fly in the face of him and says, forget it, you're not the end all, you're not the be all, we see here that Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury. And that goes to our next question. How does he respond? He's filled with fury, and everything changes. His face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it reminds me of when we were talking about Pharaoh. God hardened Pharaoh's heart against things, whatever it was. He hardened his heart multiple times. And it's the same thing that I hear here is that Nebuchadnezzar's face was hardened, and he was filled with fury. So what did Nebuchadnezzar say? What's next in this story? Make it hotter. We're not going to use the standard fire. We're going to make it really hot. And I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that the furnace was going to get heated even more. And they still stood fast to their faith. They still stood fast to God. They were about to be thrown into a furnace. So it was heated up 7 times. Thrown into the furnace. What was one of the things in here that's interesting that happened to someone else but did not happen to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Yeah. They opened the door and people died trying to get them in. So if people are dying trying to get them into this furnace, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego just kind of, I'm going to guess waltz in. I mean, that's how else are they going to get in? I mean, does it say dropped? Well, they could have, been shoved real hard and fell in, or I don't think they dropped from a height and fell in.
Well, but they were bound.
They were,
So who knows how, what kind of binding they had.
right. And it's interesting, they left the hats, the tunics, everything on them. And the only reason I can think to even leave all that garment on is because it's going to catch fire easy and torment you even more as the clothing burns before it burns the next part of your body. No, you're not. Yeah, exactly.
But they did, the binding burned, but they didn't. Because they were walking around and they had to be, shoved in. So they were walking around and gotten up and absolutely, it was totally air conditioned in there.
Right. So I kind of, looking at this, see God's protection is on Shadrach and Meshach before they're actually in the middle of the furnace. God's protecting him, right from here all the way in. God has his protection on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so how did God completely protect them? He put how does it say? Burning first and rose up, declared to bend. I always, I guess, looking at the Cho Sunday school lessons, think of a bubble that's around them, but he protected them. They weren't hot. They were, I don't know if it was air conditioning, but, they weren't. They didn't.
No, nothing.
They didn't.
It was like they had never stepped into it.
Exactly. And, and that's very true, because think about it. We go out to these campfires. We sit around the campfire, and I mean sitting around the campfire from me to Nick. And as the smoke changes the whole lot directions and everything else, you can smell that smoke, that campfire, days later on your clothes. And if you're someone like me who likes playing the fire, sometimes it takes a washing or two to get out, but you can still smell the smoke. You couldn't smell that in these guys. Nothing. I mean, their hair wasn't singed. I mean, how often, I don't know anymore, but you go to put a log in the fire and maybe you get a little too close and now you're hairless on your hands. Or, if you're loading the furnace at our place in the middle of the winter, I usually get a haircut right about here from the back draft coming out the door. The fire doesn't touch us. It's just that hot that the hairs, well, they look like they melt, actually. They singe. These guys didn't have that. They didn't, as Fred said, they couldn't even smell smoke on their clothing. Nothing at all. So how did Nebuchadnezzar respond to these events? What was Nebuchadnezzar's response to this? And this is kind of one of the areas I said, Fred? That's why I said at the beginning, this is one of the two spots where he kind of goes, maybe there's something to this God. I don't think he ever fully repented. I don't think he ever, said, this God is now the only true God. I don't think he ever said that. I don't see anything that would proclaim him as putting God above others. What I do see is him saying here that blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb and houses ruined and things plundered. But I don't see him making the God Most High the worship God everybody needs to worship. I see and understand this as, yep, he's now another God that we need to pay homage to. And if you're going to pay homage to that God, then I guess I won't do anything to you because he just kept these guys out of a furnace. I don't see him repenting. That's exactly what Fred said.
That's what he said. He stopped his burning process right there. It's like,
Well,
like, oh, if you don't do it, I'll throw you in there. You're done with this one.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing I wanted to call out here is, and the book calls it off, and I'm only going to make mention of it. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of things, is who was the fourth person in the fire. In here, it says an angel. Other writings have son of, Aramaic phrase, son of God, in a way that points to Jesus. However, this seems to be a bit out of place since Nebuchadnezzar was polytheistic pagan king with no appreciation. So I'm going with angel. I don't have enough knowledge or background to dissect who the actual fourth person was. Exactly. It doesn't tell me, and I'll leave it to someone else. No, I need a new set of lungs today. So, what? Yes. Right. Yep. Right. It impressed him in there, but I don't know much beyond that. It's just, like I said, it's a note here in the book, something to think about. I see it as an angel, because that's what it says here. I don't think this is a Christophany. That's the other thing that I'm like, let's not go down that road at all. So, excuse me. What attribute of God explains his power over the events in the fiery furnace? Come on, teenagers. He's creator. All powerful, which is what? Yes. I all heard was omnipotent. Yep. So he's all powerful. So I want to take a look at before we dive into the second part of King Nebuchadnezzar and his interaction with Daniel. There's a portion here called Connect the Truth. And it's really what this, you got the yellow ones on, good. Really what this activity in this lesson goes to is suffering. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we're going to suffer. Nebuchadnezzar says, I'm going to kill you if you worship anybody but me, and I'm going to do it in some really warm ways. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, okay, you go do you, and we're going to do us. We're still going to worship the God Most High. And when they are confronted about it and given the opportunity to back down, once when they question him, and another time when they played the music in front of the king to worship him, what did they still do? Knowing full well what was going to happen. They did. They stood their ground. So the question becomes, how ready are we to stand our ground? Now, I don't think anybody's got a fiery furnace ready to chuck us into. I don't think, there is anywhere near the level of persecution that we have seen in the Old Testament and what they do with the pagan rulers did to the Jews and the Israelites. Sorry, they don't get torn from limb. They don't get, thrown into fiery furnaces. I'm sure they have other creative ways. Animals. They do. I mean, if you go to your Islamic countries and you start walking around proclaiming Jesus, you're going to get about 6 feet before you probably meet a scimitar. The very strict, rigid ones. We were warned about that in the Navy. Watch out what you say on these streets, even though they were considered friendly. So let's take a look. Prefer to suffer activity. What does the New Testament say about persecution? Somebody could, one of the teenagers, I'm going to pick on you, read John 15, 17 through 21. And while he's doing that, I have another one stand by on 2 Timothy 3, 10 through 12. 3, 10 through 12. Go when you're ready, please. So what does this shine a light on? What are we hearing in this passage? Expect it. We are not of the world. We belong to Jesus. And because they persecuted him, because they laughed, mocked him, and did not believe him, they won't believe us. If we were of the world, or in the world, would be left alone. There'd be no persecution. So Jesus says here to expect it. 2 Timothy, and if somebody will get after that, 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 11. So let's read 2 Timothy. So this is Paul. And what's Paul saying? Expect persecution. I have been. Look at me. I mean, look where I've been. Look at my travels. My persecutions and suffering. They happened to me not only at Antioch, Lycaonia, Lystra, and I think he only mentions 3 of possible many places where he was put up for his faith. Expect it. It happened to me. It's going to happen to you. And it's going to happen to all who desire to live a godly life in Jesus Christ. So expect it. Excuse me. All right, in 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 11. All right. So, we've heard in the first 2 persecutions. They did it to Paul, they're going to do it to you. The world hates us, expect it. But what are we starting to hear here? What's the light, a silver shining around the cloud, so to speak? What are we starting to hear here in 2 Corinthians? Persecuted but not destroyed. Hey, Elijah, read verse 11 one more time.
For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our mortal flesh.
So, we're starting to see we may be given over to death for Jesus' sake, but so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in us. So that death is, I'm going to go on to read 12, so that death is at work in us, but life is in you. There's a hope here. 1 Peter 3, 13 through 17. If I could get a teenager to grab that one. My Wednesday class reads more than your teenagers. Be a teenager for today.
Now if it was there to harm you, and you were zealous for what is good. But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ Jesus as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks your reason for the hope that is in you, with gentleness and respect. Having a good conscience, so that, when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil.
All right. So here again, we are seeing, one, we're going to suffer. But what's the other side of this? What are we being told about the suffering and about what will happen as we go through it? What? Yep. We'll be blessed. Exactly. You will be blessed. I like the words right after it also. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but put your hearts in Christ the Lord. So don't fear the persecution that's going to come. Don't be troubled by it. It's going to happen, but put your hearts to honor Christ the Lord. What did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do? They did these same things. When the king said, hey, listen, bow down to me, bow down to this idol, they're like, nope, we will honor our God. We will serve our God. We're not to have gods before us. Then it goes on to say, yet do it with gentleness and respect, having conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. And here it says, do it with gentleness and respect. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, I don't think there's anything gentle or respectful about him. He demanded what he wanted, and this is the way he wanted it. But did we see anything in Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego that would have been out of line with the gentleness or respect that we see here in Peter? We don't. So if we're using Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego as our example, if we are confronted with persecution, we need to respond with gentleness and respect. Now, an example that comes to mind is you, as Ford and Chevy guys, are rivals. Someone disses on a Chevy or the Ford, we tend to ruffle our feathers a little, depending on which meme we get sent in Facebook. But yet, we're not to respond with ruffled feathers here. We're to respond with gentleness and respect. So when we're confronted about our faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, we need to respond with gentleness and respect. And it goes on to say why. Because those who revile your good behavior may be put to shame, for it is better to do good, if that should be God's will, than to be doing evil. So your goodness and the respect, the way you respond to the suffering, the way you respond to the persecution, continues to highlight and continues to show Christ in you. Let's continue to read Philippians 1:29 and 30. Okay, you read that so fast I couldn't even get there. For it's been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. So guess what? It's been granted to us. Plan on it. We are going to suffer. I don't think any of us living here in America are going to go suffer in fiery furnaces or lions' dens. But we do suffer persecution in other ways. Sorry. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. They will. You are. And while your response to a single person may have a ripple effect, it will not go out to every person. Just because you did it once doesn't mean you're not going to have to do it again and again and again and again. So as we're wrapping up, the whole second half of the sheet, which was, I really got to figure out how to print properly, is Daniel and a vision of Nebuchadnezzar's. Take that home, read it over. It's interesting in that Nebuchadnezzar not only has a dream, but has no idea what it means. Now, I've had a few of those, but I usually wake up in about 5 minutes after I've woken up and had my cup of coffee. I have no idea what I was dreaming about. Here, Daniel, after Nebuchadnezzar goes through everybody, is called to interpret his dream. And this is the second time that Nebuchadnezzar encounters the most holy God. And this time, he has to eat grass like a cow and a beast. And he's humbled. Not for very long, but he is humbled. Read through that this week, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And while you're reading through that, think about how we persecuted today. It's the second follow-up question into this suffering one is, what is persecution looking like in your life? While it may not look like a fiery furnace, it may look like other things. For some people, it may be hard issues at work. Depending on where you're at and what you do. I know some work environments tend to be a little more rough around the edges than others. And take a look at that and see if there's suffering in your life. The last question there, if you're not experiencing persecution, why might that be? That's the self-reflection question, which goes back to our first readings of if you are in the world, are you also of the world? And maybe that's why there may not be the persecution that you're thinking you have. With that, I'm going to end. Kevin, would you close us in prayer, please? Thank you.